Stop! The voice cut through the darkness like a blade. A young woman burst from the shadows, her clothes worn, her shoes scuffed, but her eyes fierce with courage. Without hesitation, she bent low, seized a loose brick from the ground, and hurled it at one of the attackers. It struck his shoulder with a thud, forcing a grunt of pain. "Leave him alone!" she shouted, her voice trembling yet unyielding. The men paused, startled by the defiance of someone who looked too fragile to matter. But in that instant, Adrian's fear shifted into something else. An instinctive trust in this unlikely savior. The room was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock and the faint, labored breaths of the old man lying on the grand bed. Sunlight streamed weakly through the half-drawn curtains, painting golden lines across the white sheets. His once strong hands, now thin and frail, rested on his chest as if holding onto the last strands of life. Beside him stood his two sons. Ethan, the older, stood tall with a calm expression, though his eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. He clenched his jaw, refusing to show weakness in front of anyone. Even now, Adrian, the younger son, shifted restlessly, his eyes darting between his father and his brother. His heart ached, but another emotion, one darker, heavier, burned beneath the surface. Envy. The old man slowly opened his eyes. Though his body had grown weak, his mind was still sharp. He looked at his sons with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "My boys," he whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. Both men leaned closer to hear him. "I have lived a long life," the father continued. "I built this company from the ground up. It was not easy, but I never gave up. And I did it not just for myself, but for you, for your future, for your children's future." His chest rose and fell as if each word demanded a piece of his remaining strength. Ethan reached out and gently took his father's hand. "Don't strain yourself, father. We are here. We will take care of everything." The old man gave a faint smile, his eyes softening. "I know, my son. That is why I can go in peace. But listen to me, both of you. The company is not just wealth. It is a legacy. It carries our name, our honor, our blood. If you let greed divide you, everything I worked for will crumble." His gaze moved to Adrian, who lowered his eyes quickly, as though afraid his father could see through him. The younger son felt a sharp sting in his chest, guilt mixing with jealousy. For years, he had lived in Ethan's shadow. Ethan, the responsible one, the chosen one, the favorite in everyone's eyes. Adrian's lips pressed tightly together as his father's words sank in. "Promise me," the old man whispered. His voice shook, but his tone was firm. "Promise me that you will love each other. Promise me you will stand as one. Ethan, do not look down on your brother. Adrian, do not let envy destroy your heart. Together you are strong. Divided, you are nothing." Ethan nodded quickly, tears gathering in his eyes. "I promise, father. I will protect Adrian, and I will honor your legacy." Adrian hesitated. His throat tightened, and for a moment he could not speak. At last he forced the words out. I promise, father." But even as he spoke, a part of him resisted. His heart whispered that he deserved more, that he should be the one to lead, not Ethan. The old man closed his eyes, comforted by the sound of their voices. His breathing grew shallower, each breath slower than the last. A peaceful smile spread across his face. "Good, my sons. I leave this world knowing you will take care of each other." The clock ticked again. A long silence followed. Then, with one final breath, the old man slipped away. Ethan bowed his head, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. Adrian stood frozen, his fists clenched at his side, a storm of emotions raging inside him. Love, grief, anger, jealousy. They all collided in his chest, threatening to break him apart. The room grew heavy with sorrow. The great man who had built an empire was gone. And in that quiet moment, two brothers stood side by side, bound by grief, but also separated by secrets in their hearts. It was the beginning of an uncertain future. The morning after their father's passing carried a heaviness that words could hardly capture. The mansion, once filled with the commanding presence of the old man, now felt hollow. Servants moved quietly through the hallways, their eyes downcast, mourning not only a master but a man who had touched their lives in ways only loyalty could explain. In the study, a long mahogany table stretched beneath the tall windows. Sunlight filtered in, dimmed by heavy curtains. Family portraits lined the walls, each one a reminder of legacy and pride. At the head of the table sat Mr. Graham, the family's long-trusted lawyer, a man with silver hair and spectacles perched carefully on his nose. He carried a thick envelope sealed with the late patriarch's crest. Ethan and Adrian entered together, though their silence said more than words could. Ethan walked with shoulders straight, trying to mask the grief that still clawed at his chest. Adrian followed behind, slower, his hands clasped in front of him, his expression unreadable. Several other relatives filled the room, distant cousins and uncles who had gathered more out of curiosity than duty. When all were seated, Mr. Graham cleared his throat. The rustle of paper echoed as he opened the envelope. "We are here today to honor the wishes of the late Mr. Alexander Cole," he began. His voice was firm, steady, the voice of a man accustomed to delivering words that could shape lives. The room grew still. Everyone leaned forward slightly, breaths held. As he continued, "First, I wish to state his desire that the family remain united. He has left equal shares of his personal estate, properties, funds, and assets to his two sons, Ethan and Adrian, with instructions that they manage their inheritance wisely." Ethan nodded faintly, unsurprised. Adrian sat quietly, his eyes lowered. Mr. Graham paused, and the silence was sharp enough to cut. "As for the company, Alexander Cole Industries, he has made a clear decision." He lifted the document closer to his eyes. "The role of Chief Executive Officer shall be given to his younger son, Adrian Cole." The words seemed to hang in the air. A stunned silence followed, broken only by a faint gasp from one of the cousins at the far end of the table. Adrian blinked, his head lifting as though he hadn't heard correctly. "Me?" he whispered, his voice carrying both shock and disbelief. His chest tightened, torn between pride and fear. He had dreamed of recognition, but never imagined his father would place such trust in him over Ethan. Mr. Graham continued without pause. "To ensure stability and guidance, Alexander Cole has also appointed his elder son, Ethan Cole, as executive assistant to the CEO. His role is to remain at Adrian's side, advising him, protecting him, and ensuring the company thrives." The tension in the room was palpable. Adrian's mouth opened, then closed again, unsure how to respond. He lowered his gaze, humbled, as though the weight of the crown had already settled on his shoulders. Ethan, however, felt fire in his veins. His hands tightened into fists beneath the table. Assistant? To his younger brother? The very thought cut through his pride like a blade. He had spent years learning the business, earning respect in boardrooms, making decisions his father trusted. And yet, in the end, Adrian, the dreamer, the careless younger sibling, was to be CEO. He forced his face into stillness, but inside, rage boiled. His father's words from the night before echoed mockingly in his mind. "Together, you are strong. Divided, you are nothing." Ethan swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "I will never serve under him," he swore silently. "Never." Mr. Graham finished reading the rest of the document, minor details of estates, foundations, and charitable trusts, but no one truly listened. The weight of the CEO's title hung in the air, overshadowing everything else. When the lawyer finally closed the will and folded his glasses, Adrian stood slowly. I don't know what to say. Father must have believed in me more than I believed in myself." His voice was soft, trembling. "I will do my best, for his sake." Some of the relatives murmured approval. A few offered polite smiles. Yet Ethan said nothing. He only rose from his chair, straightened his suit jacket, and gave his brother a cold, unreadable look. "Congratulations," he said flatly, his tone carrying no warmth. Adrian's eyes flickered with unease. He wanted to thank Ethan, to seek his support, but something in his brother's stare told him that the road ahead would not be easy. The will had been read, the roles had been set, but beneath the polished surface of duty and family honor, a silent war had just begun. The days following the will reading were tense. Though Ethan carried himself with composure in public, inside him a storm raged. Each time he saw Adrian step into their father's office, the office Ethan had once believed would be his chest burned. He clenched his fists when board members praised Adrian's fresh leadership, or staff smiled with respect that he felt belonged to him. At night, Ethan sat alone in the study, the shadows deepening his scowl. A glass of whiskey trembled in his hand as he whispered to himself, "That position should have been mine. I worked for it. Father was wrong." His reflection in the dark window seemed to mock him. The more he thought, the more bitterness poisoned his thoughts. One evening, consumed by envy, Ethan made a decision that would stain his soul. He picked up the phone and called a man whose loyalty was bought with money, not honor. His voice was low, steady, almost cold. "I need something done. My brother, he cannot remain CEO. Make sure he disappears." The arrangement was made quickly. The thugs would strike when Adrian was most vulnerable, away from the safety of the company's walls. Ethan hung up the phone, his hands trembling, not with regret, but with anticipation. In his mind, this was justice. Adrian, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the danger closing in. One evening, weary from long hours at the office, he dismissed his driver and chose to walk home through the quieter streets. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. He thought of his father, of the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders, and of Ethan's cold congratulations that still echoed in his mind. He didn't notice the footsteps at first, but then, from the corner of his eye, shadows detached themselves from the alley. 4 men emerged, their faces hidden beneath caps and scarves. Adrian's steps faltered. "Evening, boss." One of them sneered, cracking his knuckles. "Pretty late to be out alone, don't you think?" Adrian's heart raced. "What do you want?" "What do you think?" another replied, pulling a knife from his pocket. The steel glinted under the streetlight. Panic surged through him. Adrian turned to run, but one of the men blocked his path. Another shoved him hard against the wall, the impact knocking the breath out of him. Blows rained down. Fists, kicks, pain exploding across his ribs and face. He fought back desperately, landing a few weak punches, but he was outnumbered. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to his knees, blood trickling from his lip. For a moment, fear gripped him like a vice. This is it. This is how it ends. But then, "Stop!" a voice rang out. A young woman rushed from the shadows. Her clothes were worn, her shoes scuffed, but her eyes blazed with courage. Without hesitation, she hurled a brick at one of the attackers, striking his shoulder. He staggered back with a curse. "Leave him alone!" she shouted, grabbing Adrian's arm. The thugs turned, momentarily stunned by her boldness. She tugged at Adrian, urging him to stand. Somehow, through the haze of pain, he obeyed. Together, they stumbled into the narrow alley. The woman led him swiftly through twisting corners, dodging piles of trash and broken crates, until the shouts of the thugs grew distant. Finally, they crouched in the darkness, both breathless. Adrian's chest heaved, blood seeping through his shirt. The woman pressed a hand against his wound, her voice trembling but firm. "You're safe now. I won't let them hurt you." Adrian stared at her, his vision blurred, his heart pounding. In that moment, as fear gave way to fragile hope, he realized that a stranger, someone who looked like she had nothing to her name, had just saved his life. And in the shadows of that forgotten street, their fates became intertwined. Adrian staggered beside the young woman, his weight heavy on her shoulders as they wound through the maze of narrow streets. The city looked different here, crowded, noisy, and alive in ways he had never known. Dim lanterns lit the alleys, casting long shadows on cracked walls painted with years of dust and peeling colors. Children played barefoot on the pavement even at that late hour, their laughter carrying over the hum of distant traffic. The woman, who had only moments ago saved his life, didn't stop until she pushed open a rusty metal door wedged between two leaning buildings. She glanced around once, ensuring no one had followed them, then guided him inside. The apartment was small, barely 2 rooms. The air smelled faintly of dampness and cooked rice, and the floor was uneven cement with thin rugs scattered across it. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering as if unsure whether to stay lit. Yet despite the worn furniture and cracked walls, there was a strange warmth to the place. "Sit here," she said, helping him lower himself onto a thin mattress laid on the floor. Adrian winced as pain shot through his side, but he obeyed. He studied her as she moved quickly, pulling out an old wooden box filled with scraps of cloth, a small bottle of rubbing alcohol, and some bandages. She couldn't have been much older than him, though life's hardships had carved a quiet strength into her face. "I'm Maya," she said simply, dabbing at the cut on his forehead. Her hands were gentle but firm, practiced in the ways of survival. Adrian flinched at the sting, then forced a smile. "Adrian, thank you for saving me. You didn't have to risk yourself." Maya shrugged, her eyes steady. "I couldn't just watch them hurt you. Life is hard enough without people tearing each other apart." Her words lingered in his mind. He had grown up in a mansion with guards, servants, and luxury at every turn. Yet here was a woman with nothing, still willing to fight for a stranger. When she finished tending his wounds, she rose and moved to a small table where a pot simmered weakly over a portable stove. She poured some rice and thin soup into a chipped bowl and handed it to him. "Eat. You need strength." Adrian hesitated, seeing how little there was. "This is your food. I can't take it." Maya smiled faintly. "I've learned to stretch what I have. Besides, you need it more right now." He accepted it slowly, his throat tightening as he tasted the simple meal. It was far from the gourmet dishes he was used to, but somehow it felt richer. Each bite carried her sacrifice, her kindness. That night, Maya gave him her only bed, curling up herself on a worn blanket in the corner. Adrian protested, but she silenced him with a look. "You're hurt. Rest." Lying there, staring at the cracked ceiling, Adrian felt a shift deep within him. For the first time, surrounded by poverty and simplicity, he saw what true wealth looked like. It wasn't in mansions or companies. It was in hearts like Maya's, selfless, strong, and giving even when they had nothing to spare. And as sleep finally took him, he realized his life had been saved not just from the thugs, but from the blindness of his own privilege. The following days blurred into an unexpected rhythm. Adrian, still nursing his wounds, remained hidden in Maya's modest apartment, safe from the danger he now understood was meant for him. Each morning, he would wake to the sound of her moving quietly about, preparing for her day. She always returned late in the evening, exhausted from work, but her smile never seemed to fade. For the first time in his life, Adrian experienced a world stripped of privilege. There were no servants at his call, no chauffeurs waiting outside, no endless choices laid out for his comfort. Instead, there was Maya, mending torn clothes by the faint light of a flickering bulb, carefully portioning out meals so they would last, laughing softly even when her hands were cracked from labor. One evening, as they sat side by side on the floor, he finally asked the question that had weighed on his mind. "Maya, where is your family?" Her smile wavered, but she kept her gaze steady. "I don't have one. My parents died when I was very young. No relatives took me in, so I grew up on the streets for a while. Later, I found small jobs, and I've been working ever since. I clean houses, serve at food stalls, anything I can get. It's not much, but it keeps me alive." Adrian's chest tightened. He had grown up surrounded by every comfort, every luxury money could buy. And here was Maya, who had known nothing but struggle, yet carried herself with dignity. "That must have been so hard," he murmured. Maya shrugged, her expression calm. "Life is hard for everyone in some way. I just learned to smile through it. Complaining doesn't change anything." Her words struck him deeply. He remembered how often he and Ethan had argued about who worked harder, who deserved more recognition. Compared to Maya's battles for survival, their struggles seemed so small. As the days stretched on, their conversations grew longer. Sometimes they spoke about simple things. Favorite foods, the colors of sunsets, silly memories from childhood. Other times, they sat in silence, the quiet between them filled with an unspoken comfort. Adrian found himself watching her when she wasn't looking. The way she brushed her hair back when it fell into her face, the way her eyes softened when she laughed. He realized, with a slow dawning clarity, that he was falling in love. Not with her beauty, though she had plenty, but with her heart, her resilience, her kindness, her ability to give so much when she had so little. Maya, too, felt the change. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her, how he listened intently when she spoke. She felt the warmth of his presence in her small home, a warmth she hadn't known in years. But she buried her feelings deep inside. He was different. His clothes, even torn and bloodied, spoke of wealth. His mannerisms hinted at a life far above her own. Whatever bond was forming between them, she told herself, could never last. One night, as the city buzzed faintly outside, Adrian said softly, "Maya, you've shown me more kindness than I deserve. I don't even know how to thank you." She shook her head quickly. "You don't need to thank me. You needed help and I helped. That's all." "No," he insisted, his voice thick with emotion. "It's more than that. You've opened my eyes. You've shown me what real strength looks like." Her heart pounded, but she forced a small smile, hiding the storm inside. "Don't say such things. I'm just doing what anyone would do." But Adrian knew, and so did she. What they shared was not ordinary. It was fragile, unspoken, and secret. He longed to tell her how he felt, but the fear in her eyes kept him silent. And she longed to let him know she felt the same, but her pride and fear of heartbreak chained her words. So they sat together in the dim glow of the single light bulb, hearts reaching across the invisible barrier between them, both falling in love quietly, secretly, as the world outside moved on. The days in hiding stretched on, and though Adrian found comfort in Maya's presence, a gnawing thought refused to leave him. Who had sent those men after him? Why would anyone want him dead so soon after he became CEO? The company had competitors, yes, but the attack had felt personal. Every time he remembered the cold glint of that knife, his father's last words echoed in his mind. "Promise me you will love each other. Promise me you will stand as one." One evening, as he sat by the small window of Maya's apartment, Adrian spoke the thought aloud. "Maya, I need to know the truth. Whoever sent those men won't stop until they finish what they started." She looked at him, her brow furrowed in worry. "But Adrian, you're still healing. If you put yourself out there too soon, they might find you again." He reached for her hand gently. "I can't hide forever. If I don't face this, it could destroy everything my father built." Her eyes softened. Though she feared for him, she saw the determination burning in his gaze. "Then promise me you'll be careful. Use your head, not just your heart." Her encouragement gave him strength. The very next day, he reached out quietly to old contacts he trusted. Men his father had once relied upon in the company, and a loyal friend on the city's police force. Through whispered phone calls and secret meetings, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The shock came slowly, like a tide rising too fast to escape. The men who had attacked him were traced. Their payments had been funneled through hidden accounts. When the final evidence arrived, records, bank slips, even a recording of one thug mentioning who had given the order, Adrian's world shattered. The mastermind was Ethan, his own brother. Adrian sat in silence for a long time, the documents spread before him on Maya's worn table. His hands trembled as he read and reread the damning proof. Ethan, the brother he had grown up beside, the one who had stood beside their father's bed, had betrayed him in the cruelest way. Maya knelt beside him, placing her hand over his. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "But now you know, and knowing means you can stop him." Tears pricked Adrian's eyes, though he blinked them away. "He was supposed to protect me." Father trusted him to guide me. Instead, he wanted me dead. His voice cracked, but then hardened with resolve. I can't let him destroy our family's name. I can't let him win. With Maya's steady presence at his side, Adrian gathered the evidence and presented it to the authorities. The police moved quickly. Within days, Ethan was taken from the mansion in handcuffs, his head lowered as reporters shouted questions. The image of him, once the proud and respected elder son, now exposed as a traitor, sent shockwaves through the city. News spread like wildfire. Ethan Cole, arrested for attempted murder of his own brother. The company's board members were stunned. Employees whispered in disbelief, and society gossiped endlessly about the scandal. The Cole name, once untarnished, now carried the weight of betrayal. Adrian watched the news in silence, Maya at his side. His heart ached, not just from the wound on his body but from the deeper wound of betrayal. Yet amid the pain there was also strength. He had faced the truth, he had survived, and he was not alone. And though the world saw only scandal and disgrace, Adrian knew something more precious had been forged in the shadows. A bond with Maya that not even betrayal could break. For the first time in weeks, Adrian walked the streets without fear. The weight that had pressed down on him, the fear of being hunted, the ache of betrayal had lifted. His brother was behind bars, the company was stabilizing, and though scars still lingered on his body and heart, he finally felt free to breathe again. But more than anything, he wanted to see Maya, not as the wounded man she had sheltered, but as himself, a man grateful, hopeful, and ready to open his heart. When he arrived at her small apartment, Maya blinked in surprise. She had grown used to him slipping in quietly, carrying tension in his shoulders. But now he stood tall, his suit neat, his eyes brighter than she had ever seen. "Adrian?" she asked softly. "You look different." He smiled. "I came to say thank you, and to spend the day with you, if you'll let me." Before she could question him, he gently took her hand and led her out into the bustling streets. A car waited nearby, sleek and polished. Maya hesitated, feeling out of place, but Adrian squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Trust me." Their first stop was a boutique tucked into the heart of the city. Maya froze at the sight of glittering dresses displayed behind the glass. "Adrian, I can't go in there," she whispered. "Everything is too expensive. I don't belong." "Yes, you do," he said firmly, guiding her inside. "You deserve more than patched shoes and worn-out dresses. Today is about you." The shop attendant greeted them warmly, and soon Maya found herself being handed gowns of every color. At first, she resisted, blushing and shaking her head, but Adrian encouraged her. "Just try one. For me." When she finally stepped out in a soft blue dress that flowed around her like water, Adrian's breath caught. She looked radiant, her shyness only making her more beautiful. "Maya," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're stunning." Her cheeks flushed pink, and for the first time, she smiled without trying to hide it. From there, he whisked her away to a quiet restaurant tucked away on a rooftop, far from the noise of the city. Lanterns hung above, casting a golden glow, while the skyline shimmered in the distance. They sat across from each other, sharing simple dishes. Laughter bubbled between them as easily as the wine that filled their glasses. Maya told stories of her odd jobs, funny encounters with customers, silly accidents she had turned into lessons. Adrian listened intently, his laughter mixing with hers, his heart swelling at how she could find joy even in hardship. For the first time, Maya let her guard down completely. She forgot the lines she had drawn between them, forgot the fear that he belonged to a world she could never touch. In that moment it was just them, two souls finding light in each other. When dinner ended, Adrian wasn't finished. He led her to another part of the city, stopping in front of a modest but charming apartment building. Maya looked at him questioningly. "Adrian, why are we here?" He reached into his pocket and handed her a small set of keys. "Because this is yours, a new place to call home. No more leaking ceilings, no more sleepless nights worrying about rent." Her lips parted, but no words came. Tears welled in her eyes. I can't accept this. Yes, you can, he said gently. And there's more. I want you to work with me. There's a position waiting for you in one of my companies. You'll never have to fight alone again. Maya covered her face with her hands as tears spilled freely. Overwhelmed, she threw her arms around him, holding on as if she might never let go. No one has ever done something like this for me, she whispered through sobs. Adrian held her tightly, his voice low but steady. Maya, I don't want to just thank you. I want to be with you. I love you. She froze, then slowly pulled back to look into his eyes. Her tears sparkled in the lamplight as she whispered, I love you too. I've tried to hide it, but I can't anymore. Their lips met in a tender kiss, soft and trembling at first, then deepening with the promise of something lasting. It was not just gratitude, not just affection. It was love, born in shadows but blossoming into light. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet city night, Adrian and Maya sealed their hearts to each other, knowing this was only the beginning of their story. Maya's first day at Adrian's company felt like stepping into another world. The towering glass building reflected the morning sun, its lobby bustling with people in sharp suits and polished shoes. She clutched her modest handbag tightly, nerves dancing in her stomach. Though Adrian had promised her a place, she was determined to earn respect on her own. Adrian walked beside her, offering a reassuring smile. You'll do great. Just be yourself. She nodded, taking strength from his words. Soon she was introduced to her department, a small team where her role was to assist with project coordination. At first, some co-workers looked at her curiously. Her simple clothes and quiet demeanor stood out in the sea of corporate confidence. But Maya quickly proved herself. She asked thoughtful questions, learned quickly, and worked late without complaint. When problems arose, she solved them with resourcefulness, just as she had in her life outside those gleaming walls. By the end of her first week, whispers of respect began to circle. She's sharp, one colleague murmured. No wonder Mr. Cole hired her. Adrian, watching from his office, felt his chest swell with pride. This was the woman who had saved him, the woman he loved, now carving out her own place in his world. Outside the office, their relationship bloomed like spring flowers. They slipped away from the pressure of work for coffee breaks in small cafes where Maya laughed at Adrian's terrible attempts at telling jokes. On weekends, they went to the movies, sitting quietly side by side, their hands brushing until fingers intertwined naturally. Sometimes they walked through quiet parks in the evenings, the city lights twinkling around them. Adrian often marveled at how ordinary moments, sharing popcorn, arguing playfully about film endings, walking under the stars, could feel more precious than all the banquets and galas he had once attended. For Adrian, love was no longer a grand performance of wealth, but a gentle rhythm of everyday life with Maya. She teased him when he struggled to cook a simple meal, and he adored how she always hummed softly while washing dishes. They built a world that felt real, not polished for appearances, but raw and filled with genuine joy. At work, Adrian never treated her differently in front of others, careful to keep their romance separate from her role. But in private, he couldn't help slipping into moments of tenderness, dropping by her desk with coffee, whispering a quiet "You're amazing," when no one else could hear. Maya, though sometimes overwhelmed by the contrast of their worlds, found herself more confident each day, not because of his name or power, but because she was finally valued for who she was. The billionaire who once had everything, wealth, power, prestige, realized that none of it compared to the happiness he found walking hand in hand with the woman who once had nothing. And Maya, who had survived so long on scraps and courage, now discovered a love that fed her soul more than any fortune could. Together, they built not just a romance but a partnership, balancing work and life, challenges and laughter. It was a new beginning, one neither of them had expected, yet both knew was exactly where they belonged. The day had been long for Maya. Her desk at work had been piled with files, and she had barely managed to eat lunch. By the time she walked home through the crowded streets, she felt drained. Her small apartment, though humble, had always been her refuge, the one place she could collapse and breathe. She reached for her keys, sighing with relief at the thought of a quiet night. But when she opened the door, she froze. The dim, shabby room she knew so well had been transformed. Soft golden lights twinkled along the walls, casting a warm glow. Fresh flowers filled the air with fragrance, their petals scattered across the floor in a path that led to the center of the room. Maya's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she wondered if she had stepped into someone else's home. And then she saw him. Adrian stood waiting, dressed simply but with his usual quiet elegance. His eyes locked on hers, filled with an intensity that made her heart pound. He smiled gently, though his hands betrayed a nervous tremor as he held a small velvet box. "Maya," he said softly, his voice cutting through the silence. She dropped her bag and covered her mouth, tears already stinging her eyes. He stepped closer, then slowly, deliberately, lowered himself onto one knee. Her heart raced as she watched the billionaire she had once seen on magazine covers and television screens now kneeling in her tiny living room, surrounded not by wealth and glamour but by love. "I thought I had everything," Adrian began, his voice trembling slightly. "Money, power, the world at my feet. But then I met you. You saved me not just from danger but from myself. You showed me what it means to live, to love, to truly care. Maya, I don't want another day to go by without you by my side." He opened the box, and inside, a ring sparkled under the lights. It wasn't the size or cost that struck her. It was the meaning behind it. "Maya," Adrian whispered, his eyes never leaving hers, "will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. Her knees weakened, and she sank to the floor in front of him, unable to hold back the rush of emotions. For a moment words failed her. This was the man she thought was far beyond her reach, the man who had stepped into her broken world and chosen to stay. "Yes," she finally breathed, her voice breaking. "Yes, Adrian. I'll marry you." Relief and joy washed over his face, and he slipped the ring onto her trembling finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had always belonged there. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as though he never wanted to let go. She clung to him, her tears soaking his shirt, her laughter bubbling through her sobs. In that tiny apartment, among second-hand furniture and peeling paint, the richest man in the city and the poorest woman he had ever known promised themselves to each other. It wasn't about the lights or the flowers or even the ring. It was about the love that bound them, a love that neither wealth nor poverty could define. And in that moment, Maya realized she didn't just have a partner. She had a forever. The day dawned bright, the sky painted in soft shades of gold and pink. For Maya, it felt almost unreal. Only months ago, she had been struggling to survive, working endless shifts just to afford a meal and a roof over her head. Now she stood in front of a mirror, dressed in a flowing white gown, her heart racing with a joy she could barely contain. In another room, Adrian adjusted his suit, his hands unusually unsteady. For all his experience leading boardrooms and handling billion-dollar decisions, this moment left him breathless. Today he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't the heir of a vast empire. Today he was simply a man about to marry the woman who had saved him. The ceremony was held in a beautiful hall, filled with flowers and light. Guests from both worlds, wealthy dignitaries and a few neighbors from Maya's old street, sat together, united by the occasion. There were whispers, of course. Some couldn't believe a billionaire was marrying a woman with nothing to her name. But those whispers faded when Adrian walked down the aisle, his eyes fixed only on Maya. When she appeared, the room fell silent. She wasn't just a bride. She was hope, resilience, and love personified. Adrian's breath caught as he watched her approach, each step carrying her closer to him, to the life they had chosen together. The vows were simple but heartfelt. Adrian's voice broke as he promised to love her not just in wealth, but in every struggle, every quiet night, every storm they might face. Maya, her hands trembling in his, vowed to stand by him not because of his fortune, but because of the man he truly was, the man who had chosen her when the world would not have. When the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, The room erupted in applause. Adrian pulled Maya into his arms, kissing her as though the rest of the world no longer existed. Later, as they swayed together on the dance floor, the music soft and sweet, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "You didn't just save my life, Maya. You saved my heart." Her eyes shimmered with tears as she smiled up at him. "And you gave me something I never thought I'd have, a family, a love that's real." In that embrace, under the glow of lights and the gaze of all who watched, they proved that love was stronger than betrayal, stronger than wealth, stronger than circumstance. Love, above all, had won.